Chapter 896, Daly's Probe.
To buy a dictionary late at night, in a city that's somewhat chaotic. Furthermore, I obviously look like someone from Intis. That really is rather dangerous. No, I can't keep wearing this glove.
Danitz was stunned for a few seconds before he raised his hand and attempted to take off his boxing glove. When he was halfway done, he suddenly paused and sized up Anderson. When he saw him wearing a black glove on his left hand, he did a hollow chuckle and wore his glove again. Danitz added with a faint smile,
I believe that in the southern continent, a place like this requires strength.
Anderson's expression remained the same as he continued stroking his chin.
Then, what do you plan on doing?
Danitz pointed at the staircase and said,
I plan on finding the hotel's boss and borrow his dictionary. I believe he will be teaching his children Dutanese. That's an idea worth pursuing. But even with a dictionary, you won't be able to master it anytime soon. Even if you grasp a few terms, it will still be rather difficult. After all, the language here is a completely different system from the northern continent.
Anderson said with a TSK.
Why don't I suggest a solution for you? Your captain has likely taught you some ritualistic magic in the God of Knowledge and Wisdom domain, right? Yes.
Danitz replied with a nod, without a second thought. Anderson clapped his hands. Danitz shook his head without hesitation.
I believe in the Lord of Storms and not the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. The reason why some of the ritualistic magic cast in the past had received a reply was because of Captain.
Upon saying that, he shot Anderson a glance.
Weren't you born in Seagar, growing up in Lenberg, being classmates with Captain? Then you should also be a believer of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Wouldn't it be more effective if you held the ritual?
Anderson shook his head and laughed.
Despite being believers all the same, those who can actually receive a reply are in the extreme minority.
Seemingly in thought, he said,
The best method is to find a priest or bishop from the Church of Knowledge. Get them to make some charms. I recall that there are a few pilgrims from Lenberg here in Barons Harbor. Why don't we visit them tomorrow?
Danitz was just about to say yes when he suddenly revealed a look of suspicion.
I have this nagging feeling that you are up to something.
Anderson's expression immediately froze. On the airship, Klein had his seatbelt buckled and had a blanket over him as he leaned against his seat, already in deep sleep. At this moment, it was dark outside. There was little light from the lands, and the scenery swept across slowly despite moving at a high speed. Everything appeared peaceful and silent. After an unknown period of time, Klein suddenly jolted awake as he stretched his neck. As he kept death knell on him, he had drank plenty of water. His bladder had woken him up. Pulling away his blanket and unbuckling his seatbelt, Klein covered his mouth and yawned. He walked out of the lounge and headed for the washroom at the corner of the hall. After relieving himself, he washed his hand and left the washroom. When he entered the hall, he suddenly saw a figure. The figure was standing amidst the shadows. It was wearing a black robe, and by its eyes were eyeshadow and blush. At a glance, it looked like a shadow or ghost that had floated out of a corpse. Ma'am Daly. Klein obviously recognized her as he immediately reacted as though he jumped in fright. Daly walked a few steps forward and looked up at Duane Dantes' face. She paused her gaze in between his eyes as she curled her mouth into a smile.
Your eyes and bearing resembles a friend of mine, especially the eyes.
Klein immediately feigned enlightenment as he said with a smile.
Ma'am, if our genders were swapped, that would be a standard way of hitting on someone.
Daly's eyes didn't move away as she chortled.
There's no need for any swapping. A difference in genders doesn't change the definition of such actions. If this were any other time, I really would be trying to trick you into a bed if I had said something like that, even tricking you all the way down the aisle. However, I have no such thoughts at the moment. I came over because yours eyes really remind me of him.
It's really quite overwhelming speaking with Ma'am Daly. I can't let her lead the conversation. Otherwise, she might realize that Duane Dantes isn't the Casanova that has a wide preference or a romance expert. Instead, he's nothing but an inexperienced man in front of charming women. I have to take the lead in this conversation.
Klein's mind stirred as he directly asked in a half-joking manner,
Ma'am, do you like that friend of yours?
Daly was taken aback for a second before she pricked her brows, lowered her head, and smiled.
That's not something that needs hiding. If only he could be like you, being willing to take the initiative when facing a woman, proficient at creating a suggestive atmosphere. Perhaps if that were the case, we might already have children. Unfortunately, he's a conservative man. When he chats with me, all he spoke of was matters regarding work or his experiences. Any hints given to him or any joke that went overboard just made him appear uncomfortable. He often found excuses to leave. He looked old, and he didn't look after his hair. He also had a bad memory. He even forgot my birthday. Whenever I thought of him, I got mad, having the urge to push him down into bed, tying his arms to the bed's railing.
Klein looked at Daly's head with a gloomy gaze as he sighed to interrupt her.
Ma'am, you've said too much.
Daly looked up, speaking with a smile in no way different than before.
I thought you would enjoy talking about matters about this at a deeper level.
Klein let out a soft chuckle.
Then why didn't you turn those thoughts into action? I can tell that you aren't just a woman who can only talk.
Daly scoffed.
Guess.
Following that, she nodded.
Thank you for not saying that I've been harassing you.
As she spoke, she turned around and headed for the extensive lounge where the red gloves were. The corners of Klein's mouth curled up slightly as he returned to his room, shaking his head. When she came to the entrance of the extensive lounge, Daly, whose eyes landed on the floorboards, suddenly saw an untied shoelace. She shifted her gaze up as her eyes reflected the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell. Leonard glanced at Dwayne Dantes as he entered his lounge and said with a suppressed voice,
He has plenty of secrets. He's not a simple person.
Daly chuckled and nodded.
I know.
Having said that, she briskly walked past Leonard Mitchell and walked into the extensive lounge. When she covered a few meters, she slowed down her pace and once again lowered her head. Leonard remained standing at the door, watching the long, dragged-out shadows that were cast from the lights outside. Slowly and silently, he exhaled. Inside the small lounge, Klein stood by the door, raising his right hand and rubbing his temples. He stood there like a statue. In the Berg household, in the city of Silver, Derek sat on a stool, munching on bread that was made from black-faced grass powder, as he seriously listed down the matters that he had yet to complete in recent times.
I haven't obtained the information of the Bizarro Bane that Mr. World needs. I still lack the points required for the Sequence 5 Vampire Beyonder characteristic. I only have 3 friends. That's not enough. All the clues I have regarding the former chief's mausoleum aren't much.
As the thoughts flashed through his mind, Derek filled his stomach and took off his shirt. Holding an open container that had been ground from stone, he used the sticky black liquid inside to smear on the obvious bruises on his body. Although the city of Silver only had edible black-faced grass in its vicinity, it didn't only have one type of plant. They were many kinds of plants, all of them being strange. By using different powers, they could grow and proliferate in the dark, sun-lacking environment that only had lightning. One of the traditions of the City of Silver was to select different plants and mix them with organs of monsters to create various kinds of ointments. They were especially effective when treating most injuries and illnesses. It prevented the residents from dying just because of a trivial problem. They were simplified versions of the magical medicine, holy ointment, and essential oil formulas that generations of demon hunters obtained from their potions. These low-level products thus became a tradition. Just after Derek applied the ointment and took a whiff of the pungent smell before putting on his clothes, he suddenly heard knocking at the door. His mind tensed up instinctively as he held up Thunder God's Roar, the dark blue hammer that had electric sparks swirling around it. He carefully approached the door, prepared to kill any monsters that suddenly emerged from the darkness.
Who is it?
Derek asked in a deep voice. A gruff voice sounded from the outside.
Valor.
At the same time, bright light beamed its way through the door cracks and windows. That was the power of a Dawn Paladin. Derek relaxed as he opened the door and greeted.
Valor, aren't you leading a patrol team today?
Valor stood 2.2 meters tall and was recently befriended by Derek. Derek was also most impressed with him because Valor was able to rein in his powers to a great extent and was a person who took very good care of his companions. In addition, his patrol team's recent patrol area included the former chief's mausoleum. Valor had brownish-yellow hair that resembled Derek's and a thick beard. His favorite pastime was fighting with others. Upon hearing that, he said with a smile,
The 6-member council has just ordered our team to skip the area of the former chief's mausoleum, and this area is the last spot for our patrol mission. Let's go to the training field. Let's get some exercise.
The 6-member council has specially ordered the patrolling teams to skip that area? Did he plan to open the former chief's entrance today? I wonder what will happen. I hope there's no sinister plot on Elder Lovia's side.
Derek was alarmed as he hurriedly built connections, but he was at a loss. Just as he hesitantly wore his clothes in preparation to join Valor at the training field, a shadow grew out from the dark ends of the street and said,
Derek Berg, the chief has requested you visit him at the spire.
Chapter 897, The Chief's Hint. At the top of the spire in the room that belonged to the chief. Colin Iliad, male, had the tall body that was standard of the city of Silver. His hair was grizzled, unkempt, and rather disheveled. He had deep wrinkles around his cheeks, but there were no wrinkles elsewhere. Some old scars that were either deep or twisted remained on his cheeks. He wore a linen shirt on the inside with a brown coat draped over his body. By his waist was a belt filled with tiny compartments. His light blue eyes were deep, filled with the experiences and stories they had seen. After Derek, male, bowed, the demon hunter nodded gently and pointed diagonally to the items placed on the table.
Do you still remember them?
Derek, male, took a glance as his gaze suddenly froze. His eyes reflected 2 translucent worms that had the thickness of a child's finger. Worm of Time! They were translucent worms of time with rings. They were worms of time that came from blasphemer Amon's avatar.
Yes.
Derek, male, fell silent for a second before instinctively answering.
They were left behind by Amon.
Colin Iliad, male, nodded indiscernibly and said,
One of them was even coughed out by you.
Without waiting for Derek, male, to say a word, he continued in a thorough manner.
You once said that while being possessed by Amon, you were in a daze most of the time, as though you were in a dream. You were occasionally lucid.
Faced with the chief's gaze, Derek, male, nodded, indicating that he had given such a description before. Colin Iliad, male, moved his gaze away and cast it out the window, looking down at the nearby buildings.
I believe I haven't told you the things you did during those times. You did a total of 2 rituals. One of them had elements of a secret deed, and the other one was like a sacrifice. You obtained a certain reply. Do you have any recollection of such things?
Indeed, I was being monitored when I sought Mr. Fool's help and used the secret deed ritual to cleanse Amon's avatar.
Derek, male, wasn't surprised by what the chief was mentioning. He had long been advised by the hanged man that, based on the rich experience the City of Silver elders, it was impossible that they would dismiss someone acting abnormally. Thus, the conclusion that he had constantly been monitored after he left the dungeon was obtained. This was corroborated by the fact that someone had emerged from the shadows when doing the sacrificial ritual.
I don't have any recollections.
Derek, male, pretended to be in thought before he shook his head. Colin Iliad, male, who was observing him through the corner of his eye, turned his head over and said with a sigh,
Try recalling it carefully. These 2 worms left behind by Amon are materials of great value. I've been trying to find ways of using them. If I can secretly make them into items, this might be a trump card that no one else knows. It can play a crucial role at critical moments. During the 2 rituals you experienced, you might have symbols, ancient incantations, or mysterious elements that can be used for reference. Think about it carefully.
If this were in the past, Derek, male, would have only understood the chief superficially, but at this moment he was able to interpret the hidden and indirect meaning behind the sentence, albeit being a few seconds slow.
I know there's still a certain connection between you and Aemon. We will be opening the mausoleum to the former city of Silver Chief. I need to prepare additional trump cards against any unexpected accidents or cause that Lovia and company to use to inflict any harm to the city of Silver. Try attempting communication.
Mr. Hanged Man was right. The higher one's level is, the more experienced they are at handling danger, and the more accustomed they will be at expressing themselves by speaking in riddles. It's a way to leave options open for both parties.
Derek, male, suddenly felt he had grasped a particular technique. Upon realizing that the chief's goal was to limit Elder Lovia and how she represented the fallen creator, he felt that he needed to do something. However, he had zero clue on how to use a worm of time. All he could do was consider praying to Mr. Fool and see if he could provide any help. As Derek, male, spoke, he paused, deliberating over his words.
I'll try my best to recall. I need a silent room.
Colin Iliad, male, was apparently prepared as he pointed towards the corridor.
Many of the rooms across the corridor do not have people in them. Choose one yourself.
Yes, Your Excellency.
Derek, male, bowed and exited the room before entering an unused room. He locked the wooden door, sat down, and in the dark corner, prayed softly as his eyes emitted a soft glow. Desi Bay, Eskelson Harbor. Klein left the airship from the gangway with his suitcase in hand, prepared to head into the city on a carriage prepared by the military base. As for Daly Simone, Leonard Mitchell, and the other Red Gloves, they were the first batch to leave the airship. Klein had been arranged to be one of the last, hence they didn't meet each other. After entering the city and finding a hotel to stay in, he prepared to have some rest to remedy the poor sleep he had last night. Suddenly he heard a series of illusory, stacked pleas.
Sounds like Little Sun.
Klein yawned while covering his mouth and entered a cramped washroom. With great difficulty he took 4 steps counterclockwise and arrived above the gray fog. As he expected, the crimson star that was blinking and burgeoning was none other than the one that represented the sun. He emanated his spirituality to make contact with it, and he quickly learned what the sun's prayer was pertaining to.
The city of Silver Chief is asking Little Sun, no, asking what he thinks to be Aemon on how to use a worm of time charm. Thankfully, I had such a question previously and have already gotten an answer. However, using the worm of time to create a potent charm that can temporarily exchange fates will require him to pray to the Fool. Wouldn't this directly expose the fact that the one backing Little Sun is not Aemon, but some unknown hidden existence?
Klein tapped the edge of the modeled table as he seriously considered how he was to answer. In less than 1 minute, he quickly reframed his line of thought and discovered that his worries were meaningless.
Firstly, apart from Shepherd Elder Lovia, who can receive certain revelations from the true Creator, no one in the City of Silver knows Aemon. All they might guess is that he is likely the Angel of Time, one of the 8 kings of angels that were by the Creator's side. Therefore, even if they learn of an existence called the Fool, they will probably believe that it's Aemon's true body, or a deity that Aemon now believes in. Secondly, the honorific name of the Fool is no longer a secret to the true Creator, Blasphemer Aemon, and Shepherd Elder Lovia. It doesn't matter if more people from the City of Silver learns of it. Thirdly, the chief named Colin Iliad is only a demon hunter. Even if he knows the honorific name of the Fool and has a grade 0 sealed artifact, there's nothing he can do. After all, Blasphemer Aemon and the true Creator haven't been knocking at my door in the middle of the night. Finally, the 6-member council's chief is long aware of a problem with Little Sun. He just hasn't made it obvious.
As his thoughts raced, he felt that he needed to be bolder.
Perhaps I can use this opportunity to develop another 1 or 2 down lines. No, I mean believers. Little Sun won't have to fight alone anymore in the future. Besides, I've already improved since the time when I wiped away Aemon's avatar. I've also accumulated even deeper knowledge in mysticism. I wield the sea god scepter, and can stir even more of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. I don't have to worry about missing anything when facing a Sequence 4 demigod during the ritual, as long as I don't rashly pull him above the gray fog.
Klein quickly made up his mind and cast the method to creating a fate siphon charm into the crimson star representing the sun. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of knocking resonated within the chief's room at the top of the spire. And before the knocking even sounded, Colin Iliad, male, had already known that Derek Berg, male, had opened the door and was walking over to his room.
Come on in.
He turned his body and faced the door. Derek, male, pushed open the door and entered. Bowing, he said,
Your Excellency, I've recalled some vague details.
Colin Iliad, male, nodded with a calm expression.
What are they?
Use pure silver and mercury as materials.
Derek, male, succinctly described the beginning of the ritual and paused.
I think I muttered an honorific name back then. The fool that doesn't belong to this era.
Colin Iliad, male, narrowed his eyes and immediately cut him off.
The corresponding symbols are the ones left on the candle?
Yes.
Derek, male, frankly replied.
The second line is, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog.
At this moment, Colin Iliad, male, cut him off once again.
Is there no need for other ritual materials?
No.
Derek, male, nodded, feeling slightly puzzled. Only then did he realize that the chief was apparently deliberately stopping him from reciting Mr. Fool's honorific name.
Yes, our common language is Jotun. It's a language that can stir the powers of nature. If I were to directly say out the honorific name, it would result in all kinds of unknown effects. I know that Mr. Fool is a true deity and trustworthy, so I was reciting it all out habitually. However, the chief doesn't know that.
Derek, male, continued, feeling somewhat enlightened.
Third line, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck.
Colin Iliad, male, silently listened in silence before nodding.
Very good. Although I cannot be sure that the content you recall is of any use, it's still a sizable contribution. I'll get someone to add to your contribution. Return or go to the library to read some books for a while.
Yes, Your Excellency.
Derek, male, wore a deadpan look as he silently heaved a sigh of relief and rapidly retreated to the room at the top of the spire. Colin Iliad, male, watched him leave before heading behind his desk and sitting down. He cast his gaze on the two translucent ringed worms in front of him. Beside the worms was a notebook. Drawn on it was a secret symbol comprised of half a pupilless eye and half contorted lines. Colin Iliad, male's gaze remained fixed for a while, as though he had been petrified. After a while, he slowly stood up and took out 3 candles. Chapter 898, Response. After setting up the candles, Colin Iliad found a piece of pure silver and picked up a carving knife beside it. With steady strokes, he carved out a palm-sized charm vessel. Then, he followed Derek Berg's description, drawing the secret symbol of the Fool on both sides of the silver piece. The entire process was completed quickly. If an observer was watching, they wouldn't have been able to discern his actions. Yet, the final product didn't show any flaws. It looked like a piece of art that had been slowly carved out. Right on the heels of that, Colin Iliad found another bottle of mercury. Directly using his powerful spirituality, he guided the liquid inside to trickle into the charm and fill all the patterns. He prevented the mercury on the side facing down from dripping due to gravity. Repeating the process, he made a second charm. Colin Iliad placed them in front of the candles and placed a translucent ringed worm on each of them. Compared to him standing up silently, the present Colin's every move was stable, calm, and firm. He didn't show any signs of hesitation, just like how he faced powerful monsters that came out of the darkness. After finishing the ritual, he took 2 steps back and removed the cross swords that were hanging from the wall. He stabbed them into the crevices of the floor tiles at the door. Pah! He then closed his eyes and muttered, Pure and thick beams of light emerged out of the void as they enveloped the two swords with a holy and glorious feeling. The light beams increased in quantity, slowly transforming into liquid water that flowed across the cracks in the floor, tiles, and the walls, forming a cage that isolated him from the outside. As a senior demon hunter, Colin Iliad didn't wish to take such precautionary measures when holding a ritual. This was because there was a tiny chance of angering the target, bringing about dangerous developments. However, he had no choice but to do so because he needed to be certain that even if the ritual failed, even if the fool was an existence filled with malice, and even if he were to die at the altar, he would not bring too much harm to the City of Silver. In regards to the defensive power of the cage, Colin was rather confident because this directly stemmed from a godlike sealed artifact, a crown which the giant King Ormir wore, proof of glory. This was one of the main reasons why the City of Silver could survive wave after wave of monster assaults in the Dark Ages. With all his preparations completed, solely using his spirituality, Colin Iliad used his desk as an altar and created a sacred and clean environment that no one could disturb. He then lit the 3 candles. The pale yellow light flickered as they reflected in his eyes. He bowed his head and scattered the plant powder, monster hide, and fur into the candle flame or lit them, and threw them into a cauldron so as to please the secret existence he was about to pray to. Such acts weren't rare in the City of Silver. Known to all, there were rituals held that targeted the creator, but from time to time, certain residents would be enticed by unknown existences during their patrols or exploration, tempted to hold all kinds of rituals. Most of the latter was a passive act, but there were a few that were done proactively. On the one hand, the cumulative despair of not receiving any response from the creator had made them eager to grab onto any other existence to rely on, and on the other hand, many generations of the 6-member council had come to a common consensus that the creator who had abandoned the land might very well not return again. Seeking out other alternatives was something that had to be expedited, but unfortunately, such attempts only led to nothing, or death, nothing else. And it was because of this reason that regardless of the difficulties faced or how many times they discovered cities that were destroyed because of evil gods, the City of Silver continued their exploration of regions that were further away. As for Colin Iliad himself, the discovery of the outsider, Jack, brought him an indescribable sense of surprise and hope. The encounters when they explored Afternoon Town and the prophecies of the Kings of Angels Ploy and the Ecclesiastic had made him feel a more pressing sense of urgency. He no longer held hope for the Creator's return. With the 2 reasons combined, along with Lovia's and Derek's abnormality, as well as the prophecy of the apocalypse, as chief of the 6-member council, senior demigod and powerful demon hunter, Colin Iliad had no choice but to attempt to dance on the edge of a knife. He had no choice but to consider making a transaction with a hidden existence. Silently exhaling, Colin took a step back and chanted with a weather-worn tone.
The fool that doesn't belong to this era, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray to you, praying for the strength that stems from mystery, and praying for the bestowment that stems from good luck. I implore you to make these items on this altar turn into charms.
Just as Colin spoke with a cadence of mystery, he saw the altar in front of him immediately turn dark. It was as though an indescribable godhood was emanating from the candle in the middle, Moph. The candle's flame instantly burgeoned, but it failed to light the surroundings. Instead, it made everything turn illusory, making countless shapes produce seemingly non-existent, transparent shadows as they covered every inch. High above this illusory world and countless figures, there were 7 lustrous brilliances of different colors spiraling. They seemed to possess immense knowledge. And above these 7 lustrous brilliances, there was an endless grayish-white fog, and sitting above was an ancient palace that looked down upon everything. Demon Hunter Colin temporarily forgot everything else as he stared intently at the scene above the altar. It was as though something that only existed in books or ancient tomes had taken a step through the illusory and entered reality, appearing before him. If he recalled correctly, this was likely the projection of the spirit world. Before the disaster, before the time the Creator abandoned this land, it was easy to observe and enter the spirit world. The spirit world now only existed in the City of Silver's textbooks and various records, but no one could touch it. At this moment, a creaking, illusory sound sounded. The ancient palace that overlooked the gray fog and spirit world seemed to open its doors. Right on the heels of that, Colin saw the unformed charms in front of the candle produce a grayish luster. Their patterns were then lit up as they intercrossed with each other, suddenly bursting into a blinding radiance, enveloping the pure silver foils and the ringed worms. The dark world above the entire altar also instantly warped. Everything was quickly restored to normal as two strange black crystalline charms appeared on the altar. They were like a pair of eyes of some existence that silently observed the world. Demon Hunter Colin was taken aback as he retracted his gaze and bowed his head. With a deep voice, he said,
Thank you for your blessings, praise you.
He didn't delay as he immediately ended the ritual and removed the seal. After doing all of this, the City of Silver chief of the 6-member council returned to the desk and picked up the 2 charms made from the 2 Amon avatar remnants. At this moment, his mind was still fixated on the scene he had previously seen. Based on his knowledge in mysticism, those that were situated high in the spirit world were mentioned to be the 7 lights in ancient tomes. They were believed to be close to that of deities, but none of the records indicated what was above the 7 lights or what the gray fog represented. They didn't indicate what the ancient palace, which was enveloped by the gray fog while overlooking the entire spirit world, represented. And during the entire ritual, Colin Iliad only felt that the fool he was praying to was staid, mysterious, and almighty. Nothing like the evil beings who often like to express their powers as though eager to showcase something. Such a performance had a close parallel in the records of the City of Silver, the Creator. As he looked at the charms in hand and his condition, the grizzled demon hunter Colin suddenly closed his eyes as figures flashed past his mind for some reason. They were his father, mother, elder brother, younger sister, oldest son, youngest son, daughter, and oldest grandson whose lives he had personally ended. This already old chief remained silent for a very long time before he suddenly sighed softly.
It's been 2,583 years.
After 2,583 years, the City of Silver had finally received a normal response. In the library, in the steeple. Derek was in the ancient myth section he often browsed when he saw a notebook he had never seen before. This notebook's cover was made from a particular monster's hide. There were clear patterns on it, and the pages inside were old and yellowed. The records included the experiences of the original author when he encountered different monsters. These monsters were mostly accessible among the City of Silver's textbooks. Even their special traits were the same. However, the thoughts and experiences from the numerous battles left Derek reading in relish as he read seriously. As he flipped through it, he suddenly noticed a monster named Shapeshifter. Such monsters didn't come equipped with the intelligence to communicate, but they were adept at setting up traps to deal with targets. Furthermore, they could disguise as others, using what seemed like fascinating methods to complete a hunt. The notebook's owner had commented on them as being bizarre and dangerous.
This is very similar to Mr. World's guess of the Bizarro Bane's traits. Could Shapeshifter be the Bizarro Bane?
Derek felt delighted as he quickly read the rest of the entry. He discovered that this type of monster lived towards the north, in a faraway city's ruins, and the monsters in that area's darkness were powerful and terrifying. Even the 6-member council wasn't able to deal with some of them. Therefore, after 2 attempts, the City of Silver paused any exploration of the area. To date, exploration of the area hadn't been resumed. Due to such reasons, the City of Silver's textbooks didn't make mention of the unique monsters there. After reading the record, Derek subconsciously flipped the notebook to the last page, wishing to know who had experienced the 2 harrowing explorations. As he flipped through it, he saw a name, Colin Iliad, Desi County, Eskelson Harbor. Klein returned to the real world, rubbed his temples, and collapsed into bed. To give the City of Silver's chief a better impression of the fool and generate more trust, He had proactively added some special effects when responding, expressing the might of the mysterious space above the gray fog during the secret deed ritual and sacrificial and bestowment ritual. This expended quite a sizable amount of his spirituality, exhausting him.
I'll find food for creeping hunger when I wake up. I'll let it have a good nap above the gray fog.
Klein thought in his stupor and soon fell asleep. He was woken up by his rumbling tummy after sleeping from morning to the afternoon. Chapter 899, Berserk Sea's Spirit World. The ingredients used for Desi's pies are much more generous than in Backland. However, they prefer adding some local spices. It felt a little odd when taking the first few bites, but after getting used to it, it's quite a different style. Klein sat inside his hotel and swapped between taking a mouthful of the oily pie and drinking a mouthful of cool, refreshing, sweet iced tea. He was living quite an idyllic life. After he had his fill, he didn't immediately pack up. He picked up the top hat on the chair beside him and wore it. Crusher Iayela Hi Go. Meanwhile, his left palm suddenly turned transparent as his entire body faded away. Klein had entered the spirit world and was planning on traveling to the Poto harbor in the Berserk Sea. He was there to seek out food for creeping hunger. Eskelsen, where he was, did belong to Desi Bay, but it was nowhere along the coast since it was an island. This was the southernmost island of Desi Bay, and going past it meant one's entry into the Berserk Sea. Therefore, the second Klein headed for the predetermined coordinates. An abnormal sight appeared before his eyes. The spirit world's airflows seemed to be materialized as they spun into a wind. They howled as they enveloped a huge region that seemed boundless. It was dim inside, with layers of dark clouds. Bolts of lightning tainted with the deep gloom kept flashing, illuminating the surrounding area like it was the apocalypse. At that moment, Klein felt as though he had arrived in a sea that was eternally ravaged by storms. However, he knew with certainty that this was the spirit world.
Indeed, it's just like what many books on mysticism mention. The power involved with the perishing of death has not only changed the atmospheric weather of the sea between the northern continent and southern continent, but it also filled it with disaster and danger. It's how its name was derived. Furthermore, it also broke the barrier between reality and the illusory, tainting and damaging the corresponding spirit world and causing them to affect one another. In the Berserk Sea, if one holds a ritual that involves the spirit world, using powers related to the spirit world, there will be a high probability of an accident occurring, causing unimaginable developments.
Klein reflected poignantly as he used his eyes to verify what the books wrote.
From his point of view, if it weren't because of this, the various countries in the northern continent wouldn't have waited for Emperor Roselle to find the safe sea route before they had a chance of invading the southern continent. After all, to most high-sequence beyonders, they could easily traverse normal kinds of natural barriers. Roselle's safe sea route wasn't simply geological in nature, but also mysticism in nature. This also meant that since the Berserk Sea and spirit world were influencing each other and overlapped, Klein could directly use the local sea maps to traverse the spirit world's calamities.
Recalling the content he had read before, Klein found the correct location and entered the dark spirit world. The howling of the gales sounded from every direction. Even the secondary gusts of wind left a chill running deep down from Klein's soul or spine. This made him believe that if he had traveled in a spirit body state without the use of the Black Emperor card, Tyrant card, and Azik's copper whistle to augment him, there was quite a good chance of his suffering a serious injury. And if this wasn't the safe sea route, he believed that there was a chance his physical body couldn't withstand the black storms that were filled with death. Compared to the gales, the dark lightning bolts were far more dangerous. Klein suspected that he couldn't even withstand being smote by one of them. As for the hidden maelstrom and the wandering creatures, they were another form of danger.
This is a place without any material seawater. I wonder what's at the end of the maelstrom.
Klein followed the safe sea route and traversed the land at an adequate speed. From time to time, he would survey his surroundings to broaden his horizons. Suddenly, he saw a strange creature, Missy. It was dragging a huge sickle and was situated inside a black hurricane. As it was formed by individual skulls, it was swollen and massive. The skulls were either grayish-white or grayish-black of varying sizes. They were also from different species, and all of them were stacked into one, forming its torso, limbs, and head. Almost at the same moment that Klein saw this strange creature, it also discovered Klein. All the skulls turned their heads in unison, producing a grinding sound that couldn't be concealed. The dark eye sockets were countless in number as they followed and overlapped one another. Klein's forehead throbbed as he used traveling to pass through the area, entering the next safe sea route. And on the nearby illusory sea, bloody arms and illusory greenish-black tentacles extended out from the sea surface. Outside the City of Silver, a black mausoleum stood, inverted over the ground like an inverted pyramid. At that moment, there were all kinds of dense black plants that grew out from the cracks in the mausoleum's bricks. Even the heavy door by the entrance was covered with them. Colin Iliad had 2 swords slung across his back as he stood with 2 other elders of the 6-member council. They were observing the passage that diagonally led them deep underground. Lovia, with her silver, curly hair, watched silently for a moment before saying,
"It should be possible already."
Unlike how she usually switched randomly between 2 mental states, this shepherd elder was now staid and calm. She didn't show any signs of abnormalities as her pale gray eyes were deep and placid. Colin gently nodded and took out a bottle of medicine from 2 different compartments on his belt. Unscrewing the lids, he downed them. His light blue eyes rapidly brightened. His unwrinkled skin had blood vessels protrude as they got tinted with silver. Right on the heels of that, the chief drew a sword and smeared a silver-gray ointment across its surface. As he took steps to prepare, another 6-member council elder, Wait Chermont, did something similar. This bald man, who had a tattooed symbol on his head, stood nearly 2.5 meters tall. He didn't look a day over 45, but in fact, he was nearly 80. He was also a Sequence 4 demon hunter, a demigod that was one of the main pillars of support for the City of Silver. In the City of Silver, due to the lack of main ingredients, and with the citizens being aware of the acting method and having sufficient combat experience, they advanced from low to mid-sequences rather easily. Sequence 6 Beyonders were the majority, but from Sequence 5 onwards, due to the rituals required and other reasons, the number of Beyonders drastically fell. At Sequence 4, where there was a qualitative change, an entire generation might not even produce one. Wait Chermont didn't dual-wield like an orthodox demon hunter. This allowed him to use different ointments to produce different effects so as to handle more complicated situations. He wielded an iron-gray hammer, and on his back was a huge bow that was equally as massive as his body. He was like a miniaturized giant that walked out of an oil painting. The bow was a mystical item, one that didn't have overly severe side effects. In the historical records of the City of Silver, it received its name from killing a dragon at the demigod level. Its name was Dragon-Slaying Bow. After finishing their preparations, Wait slammed his hammer in front of him loudly, drew his bow, and slowly pulled it back. Sizzling bolts of lightning suddenly emerged as they condensed into one, and as it grew longer from the pole, it formed a blinding and radiant arrow between the bowstring and the back of the bow. Just as Wait's fingers released the bowstring, the lightning arrow shot straight to the mausoleum's door, which was overrun with human hair-like weeds. Silently, the heavy door appeared to have long rotten. It exploded into pieces, along with the electric bolt's explosion, revealing a deep passageway. This passageway shimmered with pale white lights. It extended far beyond what one's eyes could see, giving off a creepy and cold feeling. Colin's eyes suddenly flashed with 2 complex dark green symbols, and he reflected the mausoleum's entrance in them. A few seconds later, he held his sword diagonally and walked into the mausoleum. Wait slung his dragon-slaying bow, picked up his hammer, and followed closely behind. The purple-robed Lovia's expression remained the same as she followed through the shattered door at a decent pace with her hands empty. As they descended via sections of passageways and staircases, the 3 members of the 6-member council didn't show any unrest or anxiety in the completely silent environment. They allowed their footsteps to echo in their surroundings. After descending 1 level, they suddenly saw a river before them. It was an illusory and jet-black river. Under the river's surface were blood-colored arms that had been skinned. Green, baby-faced veins and slippery tentacles with eyes were densely entwined together. They kept flailing upwards in a bid to grab whatever passed them. The river was close to the side of the entrance. There were figures of different heights, wearing old clothes with their backs facing the three elders. They kept walking back and forth as though they were vexed over the crossing of the river. Suddenly, one of them sensed the trio approaching them. He slowly turned his body to look at Colin, Waite, and Lovia. It was an elder with his hair being completely white. His forehead and the corners of his mouth were deeply wrinkled. His eyes were light blue and hollow. His expression was numb and blank. Colin Iliad's pupils shrank as he recognized the man. It was his brother, the brother that had been possessed by Aemon. He had personally ended his life. At this moment, the other figures turned around, revealing faces that Colin, Waite, and Lovia found extremely familiar, but they were all abnormally numbed faces. Lovia's expression remained unperturbed, but behind her, an illusory knight more than 5 meters tall had appeared at some point in time. This knight wore ancient silver full-body armor. Its eyes were red like blood as they burned akin to flames. After traversing the safe sea route for about 10 seconds, Klein arrived at the Berserk Sea's Podo Harbor. This place deviated from the main sea route and didn't belong to any country. It was a free city for pirates. When his feet hit solid rock, he randomly produced a face. But he wasn't in a rush to enter the port city, which had buildings randomly laid out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an iron cigar case. While passing through the Berserk Sea's spirit world, he had sensed Azek's copper whistle trembling slightly. Removing the wall of spirituality, Klein opened the cigar case and took out the ancient and exquisite copper whistle. This copper whistle had lost its usual coldness and mildness, and it was now burning hot. However, this anomaly was rapidly dissipating. Chapter 900. Self-Recommendation. The abnormality associated with the Berserk Sea is suspected to be a result of the perishing of death. Legend has it that this deity's corpse and items are hidden somewhere in these waters, awaiting someone with a special key to open it. This copper whistle came from Mr. Azek, and Mr. Azek is indeed a direct descendant of death, as well as being from the first or second generation. Therefore, this copper whistle had sensed something, or had been influenced. Thoughts flashed across Klein's mind as they coalesced today to form a theory. He planned on finding an inn in Podo Harbor, head above the gray fog, and use dream divination to attempt to obtain a revelation. Then he would consider the time and method for returning to Eskelson Harbor. It was to prevent himself from encountering any avoidable accidents. And before that, he needed to seek out food for creeping hunger. After walking down the seaside cliff, Klein entered Podo Harbor. The buildings here were pretty much built anywhere one desired. There was almost zero planning, causing the roads to be very wide or narrow to the point that it only allowed a single-person passage. In certain areas, one couldn't see the sky when looking up, only to see a swath of clothes that were hung up to dry. Wearing a new face, Klein strolled through such an environment with many pedestrians dressed in pirate's attire. He then habitually headed for the bar to seek out prey. At this moment, he saw several people gathered at a notice board on a square up ahead.
What's happening?
With his curiosity piqued, Klein approached the area, using his balance and agility as a clown. He passed through the gaps of the crowd before he barely arrived at a spot where he could see the notice board. On the notice board there was a piece of paper that was overbearing. Covering all the other pieces of paper, it was obvious at a glance. Its title was, "The Black Emperor's Crew Recruitment."
The Black Emperor? Isn't that the ship of King of the Five Seas, Nast? The one that can traverse the spirit world? Considering how he can be considered the king of pirates, he's actually openly recruiting crew members?
Klein was rather surprised as he deliberately spoke out with a suppressed voice.
How is that possible?
A stout man beside him with his arm exposed from his rolled-up sleeves laughed out loud.
Why not? It might be impossible in the past, but it's possible now.
Klein was hoping that someone would respond. Immediately he turned his head and asked.
Why?
The stout man had tattoos all over his arms and cheeks, making him look fierce. Upon hearing that, he pointed at the main sea route's direction and said,
A week ago, the Black Emperor and Lowen's highly promoted steam ironclad warship, the Pritz, met and clashed in a sea battle. The Black Emperor had many casualties and are in dire need of more manpower.
Ah?
Klein's first reaction was that it didn't make mystical sense. Based on the published content in the papers and the rumors he had heard out at sea, he knew that the Pritz was a warship in the normal sense. It lacked any beyonder elements. Perhaps in terms of physical damage, it was stronger than the Black Emperor, but the latter could use the spirit world to leap, just like a large-sized version of a traveler. There was no ordinary armament that could damage it. Furthermore, King of the Five Seas Nast was likely a Sequence 3 demigod of the Black Emperor Paths of the Divine. He was the most infamous powerhouse at sea. He could directly distort the trajectories of cannonballs, making him nearly invincible when facing a fleet that wasn't in any sense mystical. From Klein's point of view, they were enemies at two completely different levels, yet the final outcome was not something he could imagine. He didn't hide his astonishment as he blurted,
What about the Pritz?
The fierce-looking man shook his head and replied,
I'm not too sure, but I heard that it wasn't damaged. Only 2 corvettes were sunk.
This.
Klein was first taken aback before he came to a slight understanding of what happened. How? He recalled the situation of him robbing the Tutmosis II mummy. The military's demigod had used the law that had the power of mysteriousness weakened, and the real strengthened. Once this came into effect, the Black Emperor was just a sailboat that was a little special with some extraordinariness. It definitely couldn't beat an ironclad warship. Neither could it flee. This also meant that the Pritz had a demigod existence on the military side, or else such a law wouldn't have come into effect. To be able to get the Black Emperor to flee under such a situation, King of the Five Seas Nast must be very, very strong. Below angels, he's definitely one of the strongest. From the looks of it, due to the existence of the Arbiter pathway, the trajectory of this world's military development remains close to that of Earth's. It wouldn't reach a point of not being able to defeat a slightly higher-level mysticism opponent. Klein nodded in enlightenment, as he didn't inquire further. As for Beyonders below Sequence 4, in a large-scale battle, apart from the few jobs that could take on the role of outputting offensive firepower or carry out effective defenses, the rest could only avoid a direct clash. They would then be the cleanup crew, or simply provide support. For example, a marionettist with all his marionettes feared no one in a mid-sequence Beyonder battle if fighting one-on-one. But once he was on a battlefield with shells hurtling everywhere and machine gun fire sweeping the area, the problem of being physically weak became a problem. Even with paper figurine substitutes, one was unable to escape the range of gunfire, thus suffering a second round of damage. Under such situations, it might be too late to use paper figurine substitutes again. In such intense battles, the most effective mid-sequence Beyonders are wraiths. They aren't afraid of cannonballs or bullets, nor are they afraid of being discovered by enemies. Furthermore, they have Shriek, which can affect a huge area. Klein allowed his thoughts to wander when the man from before continued speaking.
You're also thinking of joining the Black Emperor?
Klein casually replied.
I'm still not sure.
The stout man who was covered in tattoos said in excitement,
I have plans on giving it a try anyway. There aren't more than 10 people here who are better at fighting than me here. I have rich experience as a pirate. They'll definitely pick me. However, I won't stay on the Black Emperor for too long. There are too many meaningless rules, such as not being able to plunder or kill defenseless people. Or something as silly as not being able to drag a woman you like unless it's mutual. Did you hear that? Is that anything like a pirate? Although the King of the Five Seas is one of the 4 kings and is publicly acknowledged as the Pirate King, those rules are just like dog shit. I'm already used to leading a real pirate's life. I like it that way, and will not change. I'm only tempted to join because I heard that it's possible for the Black Emperor crew to obtain supernatural powers. When the time comes, I'll leave and form my own pirate crew.
As this man spoke excessively, he suddenly realized the stranger's expression turn a little odd. He hesitated for a moment and asked,
Why are you looking at me like that?
The silver-gray, glistening sword slashed down suddenly, pinning down a blank-faced figure to the ground. The figure warped and squirmed and gradually dissipated into illusory blobs of light amidst swirling silver light. Colin Iliad retracted his sword and stood straight up. Observing his surroundings, he saw that Waite and Lovia had separately finished their corresponding targets. A region had been cleanly cleared out by the riverside. At this point, above the illusory, eerie black river, a dark boat cruised over. It silently docked by the bank. Upon seeing this scene, Colin slowly exhaled as he muttered with a solemn expression,
Ferryman.
He had spent quite a long amount of time with the former chief, and they knew each other rather well. They both knew that the other was troubled by the City of Silver's absence of the Sequence 3 of the Giant Pathway, Silver Knight potion formula. This prevented people from advancing once they reached the level of a demigod. They had thoughts of switching to a neighboring sequence, and this plan had seen the light of hope during a particular expedition. This was because they found the Sequence 3 potion formula of the Phoenix Pathway, Ferryman. From that moment forth, the former chief began building the mausoleum and eventually took up residence inside before sealing the entrance. Observing silently with dark green symbols in his eyes, Colin Iliad said heavily,
Let's cross the river on the boat.
Waite and Lovia didn't express any objections, fully trusting the chief's judgment. They followed closely behind him and boarded the dark and strange boat. During this process, the three didn't show any hesitation or observe their surroundings, nor did they pause. It was as though this wasn't an exploration but a visit with a destination in mind. The boat slowly began moving across the ink-black water surface, leaving a long trail in its wake. The bloody arms and the slimy tentacles wildly reached upwards and slammed into the boat, but they failed to leave any marks. They failed to leave any influence. In just over 10 seconds, the three elders of the six-member council arrived on the other bank of the illusory river. There was an altar there with a heavy iron-black coffin placed on it. Colin Iliad immediately jumped off the boat and reached out for his other sword. Like before, he appeared cautious, not underestimating anything. Following that, Waite held his iron-gray hammer and landed heavily on the bank. He left the surrounding soil quaking in an obvious manner. He looked at the monster skull that embraced the gigantic coffin, took 2 steps, and placed the hammer in front of him. He then removed the dragon-slaying bow behind him. Heh! At this point, Waite suddenly felt the back of his palm itching. He subconsciously looked down and saw that his hair follicles had fine white hair stained with yellowish oil growing from within as they grew in size. Poto Harbor. After Klein fed creeping hunger and found a rowdy inn, he got a room that could barely be considered clean. Then he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog. Sitting in the fool's chair, Klein first picked up the projection of Azek's copper whistle and conjured a pen and paper before writing a corresponding divination statement. The reason for this copper whistle's abnormality today.